The details of my first meeting with my wife, Arlene, as well as our biography, are not of fundamental importance for this story. It is enough to briefly state the essence of the case. At the time of the most important events of this narrative, the meeting of Austin Weston and Arlene, I was 33 years old. We had been married for 11 years and were the parents of 2 daughters, 8-year-old Justine and 6-year-old Sile. Arlene and I both have above-average looks, height, intelligence, and physical fitness. Although we can't be called geniuses, actors, or models, our libido is slightly above average, which leads to a satisfying intimate life that cannot be called crushing. Arlene worked as a corporate lawyer specializing in contract negotiations and was well-versed in trusts, wills, and legacies. At that time, I held the position of vice president responsible for procurement, including equipment, in a small public company. My sister, Jen, her husband, Bill, and their 7-year-old twin daughters, Kate and Beth, live about 4 miles away from us, but only 1 mile from the craters because there is a large park and forest reserve along the way. Our children and their cousins are inseparable, go to the same school, and communicate closely. Even though I didn't know Bill before he started dating Jen and quickly married her 6 months later, he became my closest friend. Arlene had a unique quirk when it came to her attitude towards finances and saving money. She was convinced that investing money in jewelry and works of art was not only pleasant but also valuable, and that gold and platinum products would become more expensive over time. While I was dealing with the stock market, most of our savings were spent on buying jewelry for both of us, as well as investing in paintings and sculptures. We encouraged relatives to give our children jewelry and art objects, and also made sure that these gifts were the main ones for birthdays and Christmas, along with toys, games, books, and clothes. Considering the high value of our collection of jewelry and art objects, we installed a modern security system. It included electricity sensors for 12 of the best paintings and 2 sculptures. In addition, there was a safe on the bedroom floor, and each of us had a locked desk with only Arlene having the key to her desk. I had the only key to the safe, and Arlene had the key to the safe, which contained another safe. To ensure that our sensors and security system never lost power, we had both a backup generator and a backup battery, a double backup. Bill seems to have taken an example from us, albeit in a slightly different way. He had high-resolution cameras monitoring 3 entrances to the house, as well as a security system that was not as advanced as ours. Another unique habit of Arlene's was her tendency to include expensive jewelry and works of art in our wills soon after we acquired them, perhaps due to her expertise in wills, trusts, and inheritances. In my will, I specified that all men's jewelry would go to our daughters Justine and Sile in turn if Arlene passed away before me, and vice versa for women's jewelry. As for the works of art, Arlene and I decided to bequeath them in turn in our wills, also alternating Justine and Sile as recipients. This led to the fact that part of the property was at my disposal and part of it was at hers, since you cannot leave in your will something that does not belong to you completely. Everything seemed to be going well, at least from my point of view, until one Thursday evening I returned home from work. Arlene was waiting for me, but the children were not with her. We had a romantic candlelit dinner, during which Arlene was provocatively dressed and greeted me with a passionate kiss. "Where are Justine and Sile?" I asked innocently. "Jen and Bill kindly offered to pick them up for the night and take them to school tomorrow," she replied. Arlene grinned mischievously. "You should have seen how happy they were when I announced that they were invited to spend the night with Kate and Beth." I playfully joked, "What are we going to do without them?" I pulled Arlene to me and bit into her lips with a passionate kiss. "We'll figure something out," she replied, squeezing my hand. After a delicious and flirty dinner, we decided to turn on the music and dance. We practiced slow dance moves that we learned at dance classes on weekends, all barefoot in our own house. We spent a good hour honing our moves, enjoying each other's company and the simple pleasure of being in each other's arms. After Arlene started making physical contact with me during the dance, There was no turning back. I escorted her upstairs, where she sensually undressed me, and I quickly undressed her. Then, we ended up in bed together. When we were done, Arlene rolled off me and showered kisses on my face and neck. "Did you like it?" she asked rhetorically. "Wasn't it fantastic?" I replied, mixing metaphors in a daze, which caused the seductive woman, who seemed to possess my wife's body, to laugh. Eventually, we fell asleep, but Arlene wasn't finished yet. She woke me up in the middle of the night, and before I knew it, we were back in each other's arms. You're probably wondering why, when I described the most incredible sexual act of my life, I also mentioned that everything was going well until one Thursday evening. Knowing Arlene, I couldn't help but wonder what this meant. Would we have even more mind-blowing sexual intercourse in the future, or did she need something from me? With these thoughts, I fell asleep for the second time that night. The next morning, Friday, Arlene was affectionate, and I convinced myself that a wonderful intimate life meant that our intimate life had become even better. I was in a great mood and smiling from ear to ear, which my colleagues noticed on Friday. But my mood changed when the phone rang in the afternoon. It was Arlene, who called through my secretary. I greeted her with a playful nickname. "Hello, goddess of affection," I said. Arlene laughed. "Hey, I'm not Greek," she responded. "No, but you are definitely the goddess of desire and passion," I teased. Our conversation shifted from compliments to small talk until she finally got to the reason for her call. "Tell me, dear," she began, hinting at the impending disaster. "Some office staff are going to eat and drink tonight as part of a team-building exercise suggested by a morale consultant who was recently hired by our corporation. Could you pick up the kids from school and cook dinner tonight? Aren't you going to come home?" I said with disappointment in my voice. "Of course, I'll come, but I won't have time for both. We're supposed to meet at the restaurant at 6:30 p.m. Please be kind enough to help me. I don't want to be the only one in our group who won't come," she said in a pleading tone. Annoyed, I asked, "Why is everything so rushed?" "I think it's part of the exercise to sacrifice yourself for the team. You know I'd rather be with you and the kids. I feel like I have to go," she continued, her voice filled with purring. I was at a loss. After the amazing night we just shared, I couldn't bring myself to be rude and say no. I accepted the situation, resigned to what awaited me. "Of course. Can we kiss you goodbye?" I asked sweetly. "Unless you try to get me into bed, Arlo," she laughed. After the conversation, I sat down at my desk, still in shock from the events that had just happened. As far as I knew, she had never dated guys from work before, and it was obvious that she didn't really like most of them. I couldn't remember her ever inviting any of her colleagues to our house or mentioning a team-building consultant. Something was wrong. My cheerfulness quickly evaporated when suspicion crept into my soul. I picked up the kids, cooked their favorite dish, macaroni and cheese with salad on the side, and said goodbye to Arlene. We couldn't kiss her goodbye for fear of ruining her makeup or wrinkling her dress. She only smiled slightly, kissing each of us on the cheek. "This dress doesn't look like a suitable outfit for team training," I muttered to myself, "unless the goal is to sleep with someone." When Arlene returned home that evening, I looked at my watch. It was 1:02 a.m., too late for dinner and drinks. Hoping to avoid an argument, I pretended to be asleep when she climbed into bed, dressed in a very ordinary negligee. She snuggled up to me and hugged me. There was no intimacy on Saturday night, but I got a bit of traditional intimacy. We made love on Sunday and Tuesday, but I began to get less and less pleasure from it. When the same routine continued on Thursday and Friday, although the passionate meeting on Thursday evening was pleasant, it felt like there was some other purpose behind it. Friday nights became more and more overbearing, and each time she returned home later and later. By the fourth Friday evening, I had reached my limit. Despite the fact that on Thursday evening, she showed an impressive result giving me physical pleasure, but not establishing an emotional connection. When Arlene changed into a seductive new outfit, I expressed my disagreement with the fact that she goes out on Fridays, but she insisted that it was necessary, smoothing the dress over her hips. When she looked in the mirror, I said, "I can't believe you're coming home at 11:30 p.m., especially after lying about it the last 3 times. It makes me very suspicious, Arlene," I said firmly. "You have no reason not to trust me, Austin," she said. "We have been married for 11 years. We have 2 children. Do you really think I can do something like that?" "I don't know. I can't ignore the fact that there's something wrong with all this," I said. The tension in the conversation continued to build. After she gave the children a quick kiss on the cheeks, I looked at her pleadingly as she headed for the door. "I'm begging you, please don't leave. It's for the sake of our marriage," I pleaded. "I'm so sorry, Austin," she sighed in disappointment. "I can't cancel everything right now. I'll be the laughingstock of the whole company. Let's talk tomorrow, and I'll dispel all your doubts. Or if you're not going to sleep, we can talk tonight." "Do you really think I'll just accept this?" I replied in a stern voice. "My dear, if you decide to break up, remember that I will receive the children, the house, and alimony. Do you really want to risk everything because of groundless suspicions?" she asked, her expression filled with defiance. "You're the one who's ruining our marriage," I replied. She sighed in disappointment. "We need to talk tonight, even if it means waking you up." "We can't talk tonight because I won't be here when you get back early in the morning," I snapped. "The kids and I will stay the night at Jen and Bill's. Enjoy your life," I added before closing the door. I didn't slam the door, but I wasn't careful with it either. From behind the one-way mirror and through our front door, I watched Arlene hesitate with a puzzled look before reaching for the door handle. Eventually, she shrugged and walked to her car parked in the driveway. As soon as her car was out of sight, I told the girls to pack their things quickly as we were going to Aunt Jen's for the night while Mom was at the meeting. 2 minutes later, they were ready, and we headed to my car parked on the street. I had already made arrangements for our sleepover with Jen and Bill, and they both felt that something was going on. Jen's intuition worked, and Bill pieced together the limited information I provided him. He was sharp and connected the dots easily. As soon as the girls calmed down and laid down, I slipped out to the car to grab a bottle of pills. Around 3:30 a.m., my cell phone rang sharply, which made me wake up reluctantly. I picked up the phone, glancing at the alarm clock standing by my bed in the guest room. As I understood it, the voice on the other end of the line belonged to Arlene. "Austin, where are you?" she exclaimed, annoyed at being woken up at such an hour. "I'm at Jen's house, just like I told you. Why are you calling me at such an unholy hour?" I replied. Arlene's next words shocked me to the core. "Austin, we've been robbed. All our valuable pieces of art and jewelry are gone." Without hesitation, I turned on the recording app on my iPhone and asked her to repeat the information for clarity. "Why didn't you call me as soon as you found out?" I screamed hysterically. "I got home 15 minutes ago. It was pitch dark in the house, and I had to use a flashlight to move around," she explained. "What did you do when you got home from the team event? How exactly did you have fun? Were you on top, or was he?" I growled, trying to be as stern as possible. "Well, time just slipped away from me. We can discuss this later. You need to go home now," she said urgently. My emotions were getting out of control, completely destroying any sense of calm. "God, okay, I'll be there as soon as I can," I muttered hurriedly, getting dressed. I dressed quickly, went to the car, and drove to the house. Arlene met me at the front door, her makeup smeared with heavy tears, and she clutched a flashlight in her trembling hand. She started walking towards me with open arms, about to say something, but I stopped her with an outstretched hand and abruptly interrupted. "Did you check the switch?" I asked. "No, I do not know where it is," she screamed. "Get out of the way," I shouted, quickly walking around her with a flashlight in my hand. As I ran past her, I asked, "Did you call the police?" "No," she replied, confused. "Well, what are you waiting for?" I snapped back. I saw her reach for the cell phone in her purse as I quickly walked past her. Upon entering the basement, I noticed that the main circuit breaker was off, the backup generator switch was off, and the backup battery was disconnected. In addition, the telephone line connecting the security system to the outside world had been disconnected. After turning on the switches and connecting the battery and phone line, I was relieved to find that everything was working properly. Alarms reporting the theft of several works of art forced me to disable the security system by entering a code on the remote control near the front door. I picked up the phone of the security company, gave them the password, and assured them that it was a false alarm. Meanwhile, I began to inspect the first and second floors of the house, while Arlene sat on the couch in the living room and cried uncontrollably. "Meet the police at the door when they arrive, and don't get in the way," I shouted at her sternly. As I suspected, all our jewelry, art objects, and children's valuables were stolen, except for one heavy granite sculpture. By the time the police arrived, the safe in the master bedroom was open and empty. I immediately gave a statement to one of the male officers, while the woman tried to calm Arlene down. I told the officer about my wife's phone call, the details she had shared, and the missing items, providing a list of our valuables from my office. At that time, 2 other male officers were searching the house to make sure that no one was in it. This thought did not occur to me. In the end, Arlene managed to calm down enough to give a statement to the female officer while she continued to carry out her task. I imperceptibly pulled the policeman I was talking to aside and quietly suggested, "I think you should investigate the theft committed by my wife. She's the only one who has access to an open safe, apart from the key to our safe deposit box, which I'm sure is still intact. Besides, we've had difficulties in our marriage. I won't be shocked if you find something suspicious on her computer or in her locked desk." The officer gave me a puzzled look but took my words into consideration. Curiously, he asked, "What kind of problems are you having?" "I suspect she's been seeing someone else for the last 4 Friday nights. Tomorrow, I will receive a report from a private investigator who will confirm my suspicions. Even though I warned her that our marriage would be in jeopardy if she went to the meeting last night, she went anyway. I'm afraid she may be planning to leave me and take our fortune without sharing it." I shared my fears. "Is she really going to do this, especially with 2 children?" I explained. "She assumed that she would be able to take the children with her. She almost admitted it to me last night. I have an iPhone recording. I'll ask for a report by tomorrow." After the cops left, I went back to Jen's house without talking to Arlene, ignoring her cries of, "Where are you going?" I left. I had a big breakfast with Jen and told her what had happened. Around 10 a.m., I brought the children home, explaining that some of our belongings were temporarily missing but assuring them that we would find them. The children were upset and burst into tears when they discovered that their favorite things were missing from their rooms. Arlene and I tried to comfort them, despite her disheveled appearance. I informed them that I had some things to do, but assured them that I would be back no later than 2 p.m. After that, I suggested going to the park, which brought smiles to their faces. They hugged goodbye, and as I was leaving, Arlene came up to me and asked, "Where are you going?" I gave her a cold look and replied, hinting that I was going to collect evidence of her betrayal. Without looking back, I quickly left. The found photos of Arlene with her lover, Jack Traylor, confirmed my suspicions, although the location of the shooting turned out to be somewhat unexpected. The private investigator expressed concerns about obtaining reliable evidence if the subjects were doing their business indoors, but the lack of prudence became apparent when they were caught behaving inappropriately on the deck and in the pool, which were clearly visible from different sides and did not imply privacy. In addition, the report noted that they arrived at Traylor's house after dinner on Friday evening and left in Arlene's car shortly before 11 p.m. The private investigator did not pursue them, but they returned around 2:15 a.m. She left alone around 3 a.m. I went to Kinko's to make 3 copies of all the documents, except the DVD, and then went to meet with Officer Smithson. I arrived around 1:15 p.m., and he quickly introduced me to Detective June Grayson, a robbery investigator who was as attractive as the female police officers shown on TV, which is rare in real life. She was not only beautiful, but also smart. After examining the evidence, Grayson spontaneously said, "It looks like your wife and the guy from the trailer weren't at home during the robbery. Your security system showed that all systems were disabled." In order not to be unfounded, she asked, "Where were you at that time?" "I was at my sister's house," I answered casually. "Can anyone there confirm this?" "I don't think so," I admitted. "I think they were all asleep. But you can ask them." A light bulb went on in my head, and I exclaimed, "Wait, it seems my brother-in-law, Bill, has surveillance cameras." At some point, I had to go back to the car to get the forgotten pills, which could help establish the chronology of events. Then Grayson asked, "Can we get a recording from your brother-in-law?" "I think Bill is quite tech-savvy, even if it's on DVD," I replied. I quickly dialed Jen's home number on my cell phone, and Bill picked up the phone. I asked, "Hi Bill, do you have any surveillance footage from your house last night? Could you take Detective Grayson's DVD to the next precinct? She will explain the reason when you deliver it. I need to take the kids to the park. Thank you." I nodded to Grayson and Smithson, expecting he's up to date with all the technology, and he has a DVD. He said he would deliver it quickly. "If you don't have any other urgent matters to discuss, I need to go and take the kids to the park." "Thank you," Grayson said with a smile, and stood up to shake my hand. "We'll let you know in the next few days if we need anything else." "I'll be there," I replied, smiling back and shaking hands with her and Smithson. "I know you know what you're doing. But as I told Officer Smithson last night, you're going to need access to Arlene's computer and desk drawers. I would appreciate it if you could get a warrant for them, as well as for my computer and desk, just to be safe." Grayson just grinned back. I took the original DVD with evidence of Arlene's infidelity and the trailer to my lawyer's office. He works on Saturdays. I just told him to put them in the safe for now. I brought the other 2 copies home, putting one in my desk and leaving the other on the coffee table in the living room. Even though Arlene insisted on joining us at the park with the kids, I avoided talking to her and spent time with the kids that evening. Instead of meeting Arlene face-to-face, I decided to involve the children in cooking dinner and play with them. We read bedtime stories together before I had to reluctantly leave them for the night. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed that Arlene was holding an envelope that I had left on the coffee table. Her face was pale from shock. "Austin, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. I raised an eyebrow in confusion. Why will talking change anything? I grabbed my car keys and got out when she screamed, reminding me that we live in a state where there is no right to divorce, and threatening to take the children away if we divorced. "We can fix this," she pleaded. My only reaction was to give her the finger. When I returned 4 hours later, I immediately went to the guest room, barricaded the door with a chair, and went to bed. Sunday turned out to be one of the most awkward days of my life. It's hard to ignore a person who was in the same room with you for several hours in a row, but if there were no children around, I refused to listen to everything she said. On Sunday evening, after putting the children to bed, I was watching TV when she came up to me with an insurance claim form. "I need you to sign it so that I can fax it to the insurance company to receive compensation for our stolen property," she said. I studied the form, took pen and paper, and wrote down the fax number in the insurance company branch without looking up from the TV. I calmly told her, "I will not sign it. If you forge my signature, I will have you arrested for fraud." Arlene screamed at me, but I didn't take my eyes off the TV. When her noise got too loud, I took out my headphones, plugged them into the TV, and ignored her. In the end, she left with tears in her eyes. I saw her go to the fax machine to send the application form. Later, when she went to bed, I composed a letter and faxed it to the same address she used. I expressed my suspicion that my wife may be responsible for the burglary and the losses she reported earlier. I made it clear that I would not make any claims until the police investigation was completed. I also warned that any document with my signature up to this point would be a fake. I gave my mobile phone number for further communication. When it turned out that Arlene's desk drawers were locked, the detective asked, "Who has the key to this?" Arlene, visibly nervous, replied, "Only me." Then Grayson said, "I need you to open it." Arlene asked why, to which Grayson replied, "Because the warrant allows us to search it, and I don't want to damage your furniture." Reluctantly, Arlene took the keys out of her purse and unlocked the drawers. The same thing was done with my desk. Arlene panicked while her computer was being confiscated, and I remained calm while mine was taken away. Arlene was in a state of hysteria when she saw them take out an envelope from the vault hidden in her desk. "What is it?" "Oh no," she screamed. "I've never seen this before." Grayson, looking unperturbed, remarked, "I thought you were the only one with the key." "That's right, someone broke the lock," Arlene realized. "It will be easy to determine. Let's take the drawer with the lock cylinder and check for fingerprints," Grayson suggested casually. Although Arlene had not hoped for such an answer, they were going to act that way when the police left. Arlene was beside herself with worry. "Why are they doing this? What does the warrant say?" she asked in agony. I handed her the warrant and assumed, maybe they suspect that the theft was staged. She looked shocked when I left the room and took the children out onto the terrace. Tuesday turned out to be a terrible day for Arlene. The only positive thing was the children's trip to school. At work, she was handed divorce papers, accused of adultery, and Detective Grayson and 2 other officers came to arrest her for theft and took her out of the office in handcuffs. Detective Grayson contacted me and asked me to come to the warehouse located just 10 minutes from our house to identify the stolen items. It didn't take me long to make sure that the things were really ours. After looking at everything, I realized that only my Rolex watch and a set of gold cufflinks were missing. Detective Grayson called me later to fill me in on the case and make sure I wasn't left in the dark, as well as to inform me that I needed to pick up the children on the same day. Arlene appeared before Justice of the Peace, and bail was requested for her in the amount of $50,000. After the court appearance, she contacted me. "Austin, please don't hang up. I didn't know that adultery is a crime." "Why are you in jail, Arlene?" I asked sarcastically, already knowing the answer. "They think I robbed our house." "This is absurd," she exclaimed. "I don't think it's absurd. Did you do this because you were going to leave me?" I said with glee. "No, it's ridiculous. We can discuss this later. Can you come and bail me out? If we both agree to use the house as collateral, I can be free in an hour. Please, Austin, contact your lawyer. I think he can help." I ended the conversation just before she started screaming. My lawyer wasted no time in applying for a protective order on Wednesday morning while Arlene was still in jail. It didn't matter if she contacted the lawyer and he refused to help or if she didn't contact him at all. It didn't matter to me. My lawyer applied to the court for a protective order, citing Arlene's accusations of stealing my property and the children's property as a reason not to let her into the house. The judge adjourned the case until Arlene's release on bail. With the help of her parents, she managed to get released, and on Thursday, she was ordered to immediately apply to the family law court for a protective order hearing. Arlene's lawyer argued that she should be considered innocent of theft because she had never physically harmed or threatened any family member. On the other hand, my lawyer argued that since 2 of the most valuable jewelry pieces were missing, it could be assumed that she could have stolen other things. The judge's decision was a compromise between the 2 sides. Although the presumption of innocence must be recognized, Mr. Weston also has the right to feel safe in his own home. As a result, Mrs. Weston was allowed to return to the marital home for the duration of the divorce proceedings. But for this, she must wait until Saturday. During this time, Mr. Weston is allowed to lock one of the rooms of the house with a new key, which Mrs. Weston does not have, and she is forbidden to enter this room. The court should be informed about which room it is by Monday. I pushed my lawyer to make an additional request. Your Honor, my client wants to make sure that Mr. Traylor, the man with whom Mrs. Weston is having an affair, is prohibited from entering the Weston house or having any contact with the Weston children until the divorce is finalized. I'm not bringing him here, she assured the judge. The judge assured me that she had agreed to this condition. I had the urge to shout that she was lying to me, but I managed to keep my composure. I asked Luis to install a new door and strengthen the frame in the bedroom, as well as a high-tech lock that is almost impossible to crack. Arlene's clothes were moved to the guest room. When Arlene returned on Saturday morning, the children greeted her warmly. I kept my communication with her to a minimum, engaging in conversation only when it was necessary for the well-being of the children and so as not to cause them unnecessary anxiety. Arlene expressed a desire to talk, and I suggested waiting until Sunday evening when the children would fall asleep. We sat down in the living room, closing the door so as not to disturb them. After a few minutes of silence, I asked Arlene to start talking because she was the one who wanted to talk. Arlene accused me of being involved in the theft, but before she could continue, I interrupted her. I told her that the first words I expected to hear were an apology for the fact that she cheated on me and caused so much pain, which eventually led to the breakup of our marriage. I guess you don't feel it, do you? I said sarcastically. Austin, as soon as you cool down, we can discuss the possibility of resuming our love and stop talking about divorce. But first, I need to resolve a legal issue, Arlene said. Let me be very clear, even for a narcissistic person like you, divorce is not discussed. I am the initiator of the divorce without any ifs or buts. It's over between us, I said firmly. Austin, she started to beg, but I interrupted her again. This conversation will only be useful if you listen and accept my terms, I said firmly. Are you ready to listen? She nodded back. I will change the grounds for divorce to irreconcilable differences. I will get full custody of the children, but you can visit them whenever you want, share the main holidays, and have them for 2 weeks in the summer, provided that you do not introduce them to any other man until you marry him. Our property will be divided equally. Each of us will receive 50%. You will be responsible for paying child support for one child, and we will both contribute equally to the mortgage of our house. When our child, Zibble, turns 19, we will sell the house and split the proceeds. Alimony will not be assigned to either of us. I stared at her, feeling like I could punch a hole in her head with my eyes. Interrupting her once more, I stressed that I had not finished speaking. I suggested that if she agreed to these conditions, I would talk to the district attorney and ask for the charge to be reduced to a misdemeanor without imprisonment. If you agree, then no charges. I'll make a deal with you to keep your law license and your job, I offered. She started crying and accusing me of setting up this situation to get back at her. Despite her protests, I knew that in the event of a divorce, I would not agree to sole custody of the children. She cried and expressed her fear of losing everything. I met her face to face and asked the question, "Do you feel remorse because of the breakdown of our marriage and the theft?" "Not a drop. I can't believe I even agreed to marry you," she moaned, hiding her face in her hands. "Accept this deal, Arlene. If you don't agree, you will be destroyed." As I was walking out the door, she called out to me, "But if you would just listen to me, I would explain everything. You have to listen." At least that's what it seemed to me, but I closed the door behind me and therefore couldn't be sure. 2 days later, when I returned home, the children were nowhere to be found. Arlene and Jack Traylor were sitting in my room instead. "What is he doing here?" I shouted at Arlene. "You promised the court that you wouldn't bring him here." "Austin, you have to listen to us," she begged. "If you listen, he'll leave and never bother you again." "Get out of here, Traylor," I shouted. The man stood up, looking both angry and desperate. He was bigger and heavier than me, but I believed in the saying, the bigger the closet, the louder it falls. I always stood my ground despite being repeatedly beaten, and this situation was no different from others. Traylor was approaching me. trying to say something, but I couldn't hear him over my repeated cries of, "Get out." Realizing that he wasn't going to leave, I went to the phone to call the police. Disappointed, Trailer pulled the phone cord out of the wall and asked me to just listen. I reached for my cell phone, frantically dialing a number. Before I could make the call, he snatched the phone out of my hands and threw it on the floor, smashing it to smithereens. "It will only take 2 minutes and bring you back to life," he said. Deciding to escape, I rushed into the garage, dodging his attempts to stop me. Grabbing my jacket, I managed to slip out of it and grabbed a meat cleaver from the kitchen table. Turning left and exiting the kitchen into a small passage to the garage, I abruptly stood up and turned around when he turned left into the hallway. I quickly hit him on the forehead with a hammer, causing him to stagger and return to the kitchen sink. He screamed in pain, trying to stop the bleeding, and I kicked him hard in the groin. At that time, Arlene was crying in the kitchen. I took a mobile phone from her purse, which was on the table, and dialed the police number, informing them that I'd been attacked by an intruder in my own house, and I was defending myself with a hammer. I called an ambulance. After opening the front door, I calmly sat down at the kitchen table while Arlene was busy with Trailer. The ambulance arrived quickly, surprising me with its efficiency. The police followed them just a minute later. Trailer was taken away by ambulance. The police found my story plausible, and I asked them to take my damaged mobile phone to check my fingerprints, and, if necessary, confirm my version. As a result of the incident, my jacket tore, and I asked to take it as evidence. All Arlene could tell the police through her tears was that we just wanted to talk to him. The next day, my lawyer appeared in court again. The judge was furious and demanded that Arlene leave the house within 2 days and pay the cost of changing the locks. Visits with the children will have to be postponed until the end of the divorce process. The judge postponed the divorce until the resolution of the criminal case against Arlene. I convinced Detective Grayson to get a search warrant for Trailer's car, home, and Arlene's car. My missing gold cufflinks were found in Trailer's car, and a gift with Jack's name and a heart on the tag was found in Arlene's trunk. Inside the gift was my stolen Rolex watch. Trailer was subsequently arrested for theft after his fingerprints were found on the basement window of my house, through which the thief had entered. Unfortunately, Arlene did not heed my advice and refused my offer, but fought for a criminal case. She was convinced that winning a criminal trial was the key to getting custody of the children. The prosecution had strong arguments against her. A woman who looked like her, with an emerald ring and the same blonde hair, rented a storage room in which stolen items were found shortly after the team tournament. Her fingerprints were the only ones found on the lock in the vault, which added to the evidence, painting a convincing picture against her. Arlene and Trailer testified in their own defense. Arlene admitted that she had 4 intimate relationships with Trailer, but insisted that she did not leave his house until 3 o'clock the previous Friday morning, claiming that the testimony of a private investigator was false. She claimed that I stole things and framed her, but she couldn't explain how I could do this, because she admitted that I didn't have access to the safe or her desk drawer, and she always had the keys with her. She called the storage lease a misunderstanding and claimed that her fingerprints were put on the lock by mistake. Both Trailer and Arlene showed a dismissive attitude and indifference to the consequences of their actions for the family. I endured a tough 3-hour interrogation by the defense attorney. The prosecutor and Detective Grayson praised my work, noting that during this ordeal, I looked strong, cooperative, and trustworthy. After my cross-examination, the prosecution called Detective Grayson to testify about the impossibility of my committing theft. According to her explanation, surveillance footage at Jen and Bill's house recorded me entering but not coming out, and my car remained parked. The break-in, evidenced by the disabled alarm, occurred shortly after. In the course of numerous tests, the fastest time from Jen and Bill's house to my house was 9 minutes and 32 seconds, and no patrolman was able to cover this distance in less time. Detective Grayson testified that I didn't have the key to the safe. The only keys were the ones Arlene had in her purse and the one in the safe. According to her testimony, I didn't look into the safe for more than 3 months before the first team building session. The expert confirmed that Bill's DVD and my alarm system accurately recorded the time. While the case was being tried by a jury, Arlene and Traylor tried to negotiate with the prosecutor about misdemeanors, realizing that the outcome might not be in their favor. In the end, Arlene agreed to give me sole custody of the children. When the prosecutor asked me to express my opinion, I submitted to her authority, but said that if it were up to me, I would prefer that the jury make the decision. After the legal costs and proceedings, the prosecutor followed my suggestion, and the jury quickly returned a verdict. Both Arlene and Traylor were found guilty on all counts, including theft and insurance fraud for Arlene, as well as theft and Traylor's assault on me. Arlene was sentenced to 3 years in prison and 5 years of probation. In addition, the Bar Association has begun the process of revoking her status in connection with her conviction for a criminal offense. Traylor, who had 2 misdemeanor convictions, was sentenced to 4 years in prison and 5 years probation for assaulting me in my home. He was also ordered to pay compensation for my mobile phone and suit jacket. After the criminal trial, the divorce process went smoothly as all of Arlene's statements made through her lawyer during her time in prison were ignored. The marriage broke up due to adultery, as a result of which I received full custody of the children, paid alimony for 3 or more years after Arlene's release from prison, and also received the house. The rest of the estate, with the exception of Arlene's legal fees, was divided equally. She also had to pay for my lawyer's services. When my brother-in-law and my best friend Bill and I left the courtroom, he was smiling broadly. I asked, "Why are you smiling like that? How did you do it, Austin? Now you can share it with me," he asked impatiently. "And with what?" I replied, grinning. "What I didn't tell Bill, but I'm ready to share with you, is that I organized the whole theft scheme from the moment I found out about the team building event. I had my suspicions, so to confirm my doubts, I asked a colleague to call the HR department in Arlene's office. When they didn't say anything about the event, I realized that it was a fiction. On the first Friday evening of the proposed team building, I had already arranged with one of the local schoolgirls to babysit. When Arlene left, the babysitter came quickly. I paid her $50 for her services and another $100 for keeping quiet about this night. Before Arlene left, I made sure that her mobile phone was emitting a signal that my smartphone app could track. As soon as the babysitter arrived, I used the app to locate Arlene, who was unexpectedly having dinner with a stranger in an unfamiliar restaurant. Disguised, I went up to the waiter and offered him $100 to bring me a glass used by Arlene's companion. I waited until Arlene and her companion left the restaurant and followed them unnoticed. When they kissed before she got into his car, I stayed in disguise and took a picture of the license plate on my cell phone. By Monday afternoon, I had identified Jack Traylor as Arlene's companion and found out his address. I decided to hire a private investigator to keep an eye on Arlene on the 2nd and 3rd Fridays, and he managed to take incriminating photos of them together by the pool. I informed the private investigator that I was not interested in receiving his report, which allowed me to maintain plausible deniability. Until the next day after her 4th Friday team building event, by Sunday evening, I had a detailed strategy ready, describing my actions to secure custody of our children in the event of a divorce. On the morning of the first Monday before going to work, I took out Arlene's unique emerald ring from the casket. She never wore it in the office, but she always wore it when she went out. I hired an actress who looked like Arlene in height and appearance, in a wig matching her hair color and style, and with an emerald ring, to rent a warehouse in Arlene's name. I paid for 3 months in advance in cash. The next day, I bought clay for imprinting keys, and while Arlene was sleeping, I took the keys out of her purse to make casts of the keys to the home safe and desk. In the evening, after coming home from work early, I used a rapidly melting metal alloy slug to quickly make copies of her keys. In the evening, I put on gloves and replaced the lock, showing it to Arlene and asking if she recognized it, or if she had a key. She examined them both before replying. "No, I don't think so. Why are you asking?" I explained that if she didn't need it, then I would like to use it to protect my tool locks. She agreed and left. I carefully put the lock in a plastic bag, hoping that her fingerprints would remain on it and on the key. In the days leading up to the theft, I marked the path through the woods from my house to Jen's house with reflectors. The day before the robbery, I put an envelope with an access code and a key with her fingerprints in her desk drawer at the hardware store. I made a duplicate key for myself and put it in the drawer too. The same woman who rented a room for me rented a van with a motorcycle trunk, and her boyfriend rented a motorcycle for me. I parked the bike unnoticed in the thick of the trees behind Jen and Bill's house. In addition, I found out the password to Arlene's laptop from the list of passwords in her closed desk, created a new email box, and left a draft letter in it, supposedly for Jack Traylor. The letter expressed excitement about the upcoming meeting and discussed their plan to live off stolen property while she was going through a divorce. I hired an actress and her boyfriend to be available on the fourth Friday night during team-building classes. They were instructed to enter from the side of Traylor's house, use the spare key to Arlene's car, and drive away in it. In addition, the guy had to open Traylor's car with lockpicks and put my gold cufflinks between the door and the passenger side seat. I also put a wrapped box with Jack's name on the tag and my Rolex watch in the trunk of Arlene's car. Earlier in the day, I parked the rented van in the garage and turned off the automatic garage door opener. 2 days before, I transferred Traylor's fingerprints from a glass goblet in a restaurant to a basement window to facilitate access to it. It turned out to be much easier than I expected. I found information about cocoa powder, a shallow bowl, and a small brush, not on the computer but in the library. Together with a small amount of patience, these were all the necessary tools. Surprisingly, I managed to deceive the authorities with my plan. It was only after talking to Arlene, begging her not to leave on the fourth Friday, that I fully devoted myself to the implementation of my plan. I truly believe that if she had stayed at home that night and ended her relationship with Traylor, we would have had a chance to succeed. But I would still take revenge on him as soon as she threatened to take the children away if I tried to divorce her. My love for her disappeared. I immediately began planning my escape. Bill unknowingly helped me by answering my questions about the part of the house that the cameras didn't cover, the basement window with fake metal bars. After a few weeks, I put my plan into action. I received a message from the actress saying that she and her boyfriend left the Traylor house because of the hot night. Traylor left several windows open in her car, so her boyfriend didn't have to break down the door to leave the cufflinks. When I returned to Bill's house from the car, I had already opened the hidden basement window. I quickly got out of the car, ran to the motorcycle, and sped through the woods at over 40 miles per hour, relying on the retroreflectors that were supposed to warn me about obstacles. I got to the basement window of my house, which I had previously removed from the alarm system, and put Traylor's fingerprints on it. Putting on gloves, I started by disconnecting the phone line, took off the battery, turned off the backup generator, and then turned off the main switch using a key made on our slopes. I unlocked the safe and quickly emptied its contents. Although I was working in the dark, in less than an hour, I cleaned everything out and loaded it into a van parked in the garage. Then I went to the vault where I transferred everything to a rented queue and secured it with a lock with Arlene's fingerprints. It took a little over an hour. I returned the van to the rental office, parked it in the parking lot, and put the keys in the drawer. I hailed a taxi and asked to be dropped off a block from my house. I rode my motorcycle to Bill's house, collecting reflectors along the way. I hid the bike behind the trees and returned to Bill's house through the window, attaching fake metal bars to it. The fact that Traylor came to my house and did what he did was a pleasant surprise for me. I never found out the reason why Arlene decided to have an affair with Traylor or any other details about it. I guess if I had taken the time to listen to any of them when they wanted to discuss it, I could have learned more. But after Arlene rejected me when I offered her the last opportunity, I stopped caring. I decided to take revenge, and now they have to deal with the consequences. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.